The Roman Empire was obsessed with gold, but there was something they craved even more. So rare, so valuable, it shaped their economy, meals, and power. Then it vanished without a trace. No fossils, no seeds, no answers. How does something that important just disappear? Its name is Silphium, and it was the most expensive thing you could buy in ancient Rome. More costly than gold, silver, or precious gems, this single plant commanded higher prices than anything else in the known world. People literally used Silphium sap as money, not just expensive money, real currency that you could trade for houses, slaves, or entire farms. The plant basically became the world's first vegetable ATM machine. Merchants would measure out tiny drops of Silphium sap the same way modern banks count dollar bills. Roman leaders kept their Silphium locked away in treasure rooms. These weren't garden sheds or kitchen pantries. These were the same vaults where empires stored their most valuable possessions. Imagine keeping lettuce in a bank safe next to your diamonds. Only the absolute wealthiest people could afford to use Silphium regularly. We're talking about folks who owned multiple mansions, commanded armies, and controlled entire cities. Even these super rich Romans had to budget carefully when buying Silphium. A tiny piece might cost what ordinary people earned in an entire year. The plant created incredible wealth for anyone lucky enough to control its trade. Whole cities became rich just by managing Silphium exports. Traders would risk their lives crossing dangerous seas and hostile territories just to get authentic Silphium to sell in distant markets. It was like discovering oil, but the oil was green and grew flowers. Political alliances formed around Silphium access. Wars were fought to protect trade routes. Entire economies rose and fell based on Silphium availability. Trading expeditions would sometimes return with nothing but Silphium and still make enormous profits. Ships that carried Silphium were heavily guarded because pirates knew exactly what they were after. The mere rumor of a Silphium shipment could change market prices across the Mediterranean. But what made this random plant so ridiculously valuable? The answer lay in its impossible growing requirements. Silphium grew in exactly one spot on the entire planet. Not just anywhere in North Africa, not even all of Libya. Just a 125-mile stretch of coastline near the city of Cyrene. The plant basically chose the world's smallest neighborhood and refused to move anywhere else. This wasn't some tropical paradise or magical mountain valley, just ordinary-looking coastal land with scattered hills and Mediterranean scrub brush. Yet somehow this narrow strip had become the only place on Earth where the most valuable plant in human history would grow. Roman farmers tried everything to expand Silphium cultivation. They shipped Cyrene soil to other coastal areas with similar climates. They planted seeds in Egypt, Greece, and southern Italy where conditions seemed identical. Every attempt failed, like trying to relocate the ocean to your backyard. Local Cyrenaeans believed Silphium needed a perfect mix of salty sea winds and fresh mountain runoff water. The coastal breezes had to carry exactly the right moisture levels, while mountain streams brought specific minerals down to the growing areas. Too much salt killed the plants. Too little, and they never sprouted. The plants grew completely wild and scattered across the landscape. Nobody could predict where new Silphium would appear from year to year. It was like playing hide and seek with your most valuable possession. Cyrenaean collectors would spend weeks searching hillsides just to find a few plants that might have sprouted in unexpected locations. Wild animals made the search even harder. Goats, sheep, and deer loved eating young Silphium shoots before humans could locate them. The tender green sprouts were apparently delicious to grazing animals who had no idea they were destroying fortunes with every bite. Even when Rome conquered Cyrene and controlled the entire region, they couldn't force Silphium to grow in new areas. The most powerful empire in the world was completely helpless against one stubborn plant that refused to cooperate with human plans. The Romans could build roads through mountains and aqueducts across valleys, but they couldn't convince a weed to grow where they wanted it. The location wasn't just rare, it felt almost chosen, like nature had deliberately picked this one spot to hide its greatest treasure from human control. With Silphium so impossibly difficult to find and impossible to farm, why were people willing to pay more than gold just to get their hands on it? Silphium solved more problems than any other plant in the ancient world. Romans didn't just collect it because it was rare. They needed it for cooking, medicine, and personal issues that no other remedy could handle. Wealthy kitchens used Silphium as their secret weapon for amazing flavors. Cooks would add microscopic amounts to sauces, stews, and roasted meats. It was like having magical seasoning that cost more than the entire meal. Ancient cookbooks treated silphium measurements like precious metal recipes, specifying tiny pinches for maximum impact. Doctors prescribed silphium for serious medical conditions. Persistent coughs, stomach disorders, infected wounds, and dangerous fevers all got the silphium treatment. The plant was basically ancient Rome's version of super medicine. Patients would pay enormous sums just to try silphium-based remedies when nothing else worked. Women used silphium for birth control, making it incredibly valuable for family planning. In an era without modern contraception, this use alone created massive demand. People also mixed silphium into love potions. The plant was used for emotional problems too. Anxiety, depression, and nervous conditions all got treated with silphium preparations. Rich families hoarded silphium like modern people collect rare art. Small containers of silphium passed down through generations as precious inheritance. Grandparents left their grandchildren spice collections worth more than kingdoms. Some wealthy Romans would display their silphium collections to impress dinner guests. Having silphium visible in your home was like owning the latest luxury car. Servants were specifically trained to handle silphium properly because dropping even a small piece could cost their master a fortune. But what exactly were people getting so excited about when they used this mysterious plant? Silphium looked surprisingly ordinary for the world's most valuable plant. Thick green stalks supported broad, flat leaves arranged like umbrellas. Clusters of bright yellow flowers crowned each plant during the blooming season. It basically looked like regular garden herbs that had been hitting the gym. The famous heart-shaped seed pods made silphium instantly recognizable. These distinctive seeds appeared on coins, artwork, and official documents throughout the Mediterranean. Some scholars believe our modern heart symbol actually comes from silphium seed shapes. The real treasure was the thick golden sap that oozed from cut stalks. This resin-like substance had the consistency of honey mixed with tree syrup. Collectors would carefully scrape every drop because losing even small amounts meant losing serious money. Ancient writers described silphium's aroma as overwhelmingly powerful. Imagine garlic and pine trees having an argument in your nose. The smell could fill entire buildings and linger for hours. Some people found it pleasant and exotic. Others thought it was unbearably strong. The taste was even more intense than the smell. Extremely sharp, fiery hot, and bitter all at the same time. Experienced cooks used amounts so small they could barely be seen because too much silphium would ruin any dish completely. It was like eating lightning with a side of regret if you used too much. Some people dried silphium to preserve it longer. Others kept fresh sap in sealed containers for immediate use. Either way, handling silphium required serious skill and careful measurement. Professional silphium handlers developed special techniques for processing the plant without wasting precious material. They used specific knives, collection vessels, and timing methods passed down through generations. Masters of silphium preparation could command high wages just for their expertise in handling the valuable plant properly. But all this careful handling and precious preparation couldn't solve silphium's biggest problem. Silphium's extinction story reads like a disaster movie where everyone sees the ending coming, but nobody can stop it. The very success that made silphium legendary also guaranteed its doom. Overharvesting became the biggest killer. Every plant cut down was gone forever since nobody could grow replacements. It was like eating your only chicken and expecting more eggs tomorrow. Demand kept growing while supply could only shrink with each harvest season. The grazing animal problem got worse every year. As silphium became more valuable, more people brought livestock to Cyrene hoping to make money from the booming trade. Sheep, goats, and cattle trampled seedlings into the dirt before they could mature. The few baby plants that survived the trampling got eaten as tasty snacks. These animals were basically running the world's most expensive salad bar. They had no idea they were destroying fortunes with every bite, just munching away on shoots worth more than houses. Climate changes may have delivered the final blow to struggling silphium populations. The plant needed incredibly specific rainfall patterns and temperature ranges to survive. Even small shifts in weather could be catastrophic for something so picky about growing conditions. By the 1st century AD, finding real silphium became nearly impossible. Prices reached astronomical levels as the last few plants disappeared from their wild homes. Collectors would search for months just to find a single stalk. The final chapter came when the very last known Silphium stalk was ceremonially presented to Emperor Nero. That single plant represented the end of an entire species that had been worth more than kingdoms. The moment marked the end of a species that had built cities, influenced empires, and created more wealth than most nations ever dreamed of. When Silphium went extinct, the world lost more than just an expensive plant. An entire species that had shaped Mediterranean civilization vanished forever because humans couldn't figure out how to make more of it. The empty hillsides near Cyrene became silent monuments to what happens when rare resources disappear before we learn to protect them. But Romans refused to give up on the flavors and benefits they had lost. They desperately needed something to fill the massive gap of Silphium left behind. When Silphium disappeared forever, Romans frantically searched for anything that could replace their lost treasure. They eventually found Asafoetida, a plant that smells similar to Silphium but came with serious drawbacks. Asafoetida became known as the stinking cousin of Silphium. The name tells you everything about how Romans felt about their substitute. Cheaper than Silphium? Yes. As effective? Not even close. The replacement smelled so bad that even desperate people complained about it. Doctors used Asafoetida reluctantly for medical treatments. They knew it wasn't as powerful as Silphium, but had no other options for certain conditions. It was like replacing a thoroughbred racehorse with a donkey. Medical texts from this period show clear disappointment with Asafoetida's weaker effects. Chefs faced even bigger problems with the substitute. Asafoetida had an incredibly harsh smell that could clear entire kitchens. Cooks complained that the stench lingered on their hands, clothes, and cooking equipment for days. The smell was so bad that using Asafoetida became punishment duty in wealthy kitchens. Trade routes shifted toward other valuable spices like cinnamon, black pepper, and exotic herbs from India and China. These alternatives became expensive and sought after, but none ever achieved Silphium's legendary status or incredible value. The big difference was that Asafoetida could actually be farmed successfully. People could grow it in gardens and controlled fields without the impossible requirements that made Silphium so rare. But being farmable meant it could never command Silphium's gold-beating prices. Romans kept mentioning Silphium in their writings long after the plant had vanished completely. Poets wrote about it. Historians recorded its importance. Medical texts continued referencing Silphium treatments that nobody could perform anymore. Writers kept praising Silphium decades after extinction, like food critics reviewing a restaurant that had burned down. Even generations later, people still compared other plants to Silphium and found them lacking. The replacements actually proved how truly special Silphium had been. Nothing else combined the same rarity, effectiveness, and cultural importance that had made one plant worth more than entire kingdoms. Silphium's story became a permanent reminder of what the world loses when we can't protect the rarest treasures nature creates.